So, thank you for being back. Our next session is a panel discussion on payments integration in the Americas, a critical topic for regional finance cooperation. Faster, more efficient, and secure cross-border payments have significant potential economic benefits. Central bank digital currencies could help facilitate this, but there are many other aspects to be considered and discussed. So we are here for that. Our moderator for this session is Cecilia Skingsley, the head of the BIS Innovation Hub since 2022. The BIS Innovation Hub is actively working on various technological solutions for cross-border payments. And Cecilia is a member of the BIS Executive Committee, and previously she was first Deputy Governor of the Riksbank. Welcome, Cecilia. Please join me in welcoming Cecilia and our panelists here at the stage.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the kind introduction. I can say that it's always a bit of a challenge to be the session between the audience and lunch. And food here in this country is fantastic. But this is a very eager panel because they were all waiting for me. I was the last one up on stage, so they're really keen to get going. And they promised me a really rich discussion. So time will fly and we will learn a lot. As we heard, the topic is payments integration in the Americas. Maybe we should add digital payments in payments integration. This is a region, I can say that traveling a lot in the world as I do, that is impressing other countries and is seen as a role model because it has made important strides in developing domestic fast payment systems. We know that Latin Americans with a bank account, which is an important qualifier in many countries, Latin Americans that has that can now make standard-sized payments cheaply and quickly around the clock. But unfortunately, much less progress has been made in the cross-border payments area, which still tends to be much slower and more expensive than domestic payments. And here we're primarily thinking about retail payments. So in this panel, but not only, in this panel we will explore why this might be the case and what we could do about it. So let me introduce our panelists, starting on my left side. Gabriel Galípolo has been governor of the Central Bank of Brazil since the beginning of the year. Before, he was deputy governor responsible for monetary policy. He joined the central bank in 2023 after a distinguished career in the financial sector, academia, and government. Next is Roger Madrigal, governor of the Central Bank of Costa Rica. Roger looks back at a long career at the central bank, including as its chief economist. Lorenza Martinez next is Chief Operating Officer of Intercam. Intercam is a Mexican bank, especially offering service related to nearshoring. Lorenza assumed her current position in March 24 after serving as the CEO of Banco Actinver. Did I get that right? Yeah. Thank you. For 3 years. Before moving to the financial sector, Lorenza also had a successful career at Accenture, the Bank of Mexico, and the government. Well, last but not least, Anderson Caputo is chief of the Connectivity Markets and Finance Division at the IDB. Before moving to his current position, he worked at the World Bank and the Brazilian Treasury, focusing on issues related to capital market development, among others. So we will begin the panel with initial remarks by the panelists. I will then take the opportunity as the moderator, ask you a follow-up question each, and if time allows, open the floor for additional questions. So it's a great honor for me now to give the floor to Governor Galípolo, and then we'll follow by Governor Madrigal, Lorenza, and Anderson. Please.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Thank you very much, you all. It's not only hard to come before the lunch, but also after such great presentations as we saw here. thankfully, I don't see Tobias here, so I can escape the question that he made to me. This is the first day after blackout period in Brazil, so if I cannot answer that question about monetary policy, I avoid creating any kind of commotion in the market in Brazil. But going to the topic, first of all, I would like to thank the BIS for the invitation to speak about payment integration in the Americas. Payment integration has a huge potential to facilitate cross-border financial transactions and international trading region. In fact, financial integration has been at the core of the innovation agenda that the Banco Central do Brasil has implemented over the few years. The main innovation projects include our instant payment system, the PIX. As you know, people from the Central Bank of Brazil are justifiably accused of talking too much about the PIX. But we like to talk about the PIX a lot. The Open Finance and the DREX. The DREX is the kind of central bank digital currency of Brazil. And I said kind of because it's not exactly as we used to conceive a central bank digital currency, and we can return on that topic later. From the beginning, we recognized the need for a public good solution to support the implementation of a fast payment system in Brazil. The idea of developing a fast payment system had existed at Banco Central do Brasil for more than 10 years. So the first vote approved by the board on the topic dates back to when my friend Tombini was still governor. So for more than 10 years, we started discussing this. The obstacle to its development came from resistance by incumbents who already provided solutions that involved fee charges, so a fast payment system would require new investments and the prospect of loss of revenue, given that it would be free of charge. This compounded by the absence of popular demand for a solution in this area, given the diversity of other needs that Brazilian society presents. Therefore, in addition to relying on the excellent technical capacity of the Banco Central do Brasil staff, and factors such as the social distance imposed by the pandemic, which possibly acted as a catalyst for the development and acceptance of the PIX, political will was also required. As I said, I know that the Banco Central do Brasil are often accused of being monothematic and talking excessively about the PIX, but this long introduction aims to underline the central message of my speech. The creation of a critical mass of users and network effects was crucial to the PIX success. For this purpose, the Banco Central do Brasil had to use its legal mandate as a payment system regulator to force large institutions, those with more than 500,000 accounts, to participate in PIX in order to create a critical mass to users. Thus, we created the critical mass through regulation. While about 30 institutions were initially required to participate in PIX, more than 700 other institutions joined PIX voluntarily. As a result, PIX not only increased competition within the Brazilian payment sector, but also met the demand for a fast, cheap, easy, and secure payment option. And given its programmability, PIX has the potential to enable integration with international instant payment systems. Today, technology is no longer an obstacle for this interlinkage. Each country can have its own fast payment system, and technology can connect different instant payment systems in different ways. Globally, the G20 and the CPMI have done a great job in developing a roadmap for cross-border payments. This roadmap encompasses a plan to make cross-border payments faster, cheaper, more accessible, and transparent, addressing a key challenge and frictions. Within this plan, a conceptual work stream that could yield improvements in the medium term for cross-border payments is the interlinkage of fast payment systems. However, there are still governance issues that hinder cross-border payments and the integration of international fast payment systems. Countries today have different rules, for instance, for taxation and money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism, and for the identification of the final beneficiary of transactions. To integrate international payment systems, we need to establish a level playing field with minimum common rules for cross-border payments. Any jurisdiction that wants to participate would have to adhere to this set of rules. As I try to highlight, it is important to bear in mind that these benefits depend on a critical mass of users and transactions, as well as a network effects for the ecosystem to gain traction. In the Americas, the US and Canada account for the large shares of incoming and outgoing remittances. Therefore, the impact of any initiative for fast payment system integration in the region aimed at reducing the costs and improving speed heavily relies on the connection to a private or public fast payment systems solution in the US and Canada. To conclude, at the Banco Central do Brasil, we believe that technology not only brings efficiency and modernization, but is also a primary instrument in propelling financial inclusion forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor Galípolo. We continue immediately to Governor Madrigal. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Alexandre, for inviting me. Thank you, Don Agustin. I'm going to talk about a little bit about SIMPE in Costa Rica. SIMPE is the payment system in Costa Rica. We have some fast payments. It depends on the device that we use. It can be used by the traditional banking. You go to the websites, but also using the telephone. The one we call SIMPE Mobile. Financial integration and financial inclusion has been the result of the development of the payment system, not in the other way around. As my colleague from Brazil says that they haven't that in mind. We didn't have that in mind. The only thing that we have in mind was efficiency, to make this faster, cheaper. Some characteristics. Something that I have said before going through this. I will say that SIMPE is well developed, mature for the local payments inside the country. But we have not do too much about cross-border payments. This is still a huge challenge for us. Okay, more or less, more than 91% of the population, 15 years and older, use SIMPE. They have a banking account in Costa Rica. So this is a huge, in Latin American terms, financial inclusion. We measure that by who has these official accounts in the financial system. The fast payments, they are done in less than 1.7 seconds. There is no limit established for the central bank. Are the banks, the provider, the intermediary, the financial intermediaries, the ones that set with their clients, their customers, what is the limit? It's available all the time, 24 hours, 7 days a day. The settlements is we call gross settlement, is real time for all participants, totally automated. It means that once that you give the order to send the funds, there is no human intervention until it gets to the destined, the final user. There is a verification process that is before the confirmation of the payment, and he's running into some frictions with the settlement currency. Is only for for exchange intermediaries. It's not for the general population. You can do transfers with other currencies, foreign currency, but for the fast payments, it's developed only for the local currency. We use the International Standard Bank account, the IBAN. All the accounts has a number, IBAN accounts. It was a surprise for us. That was something very well known, for example, in some parts of South America and Spain, but not in the US. I think that they are now in this process. The standard messaging is we developed our own, but now are in the process to comply according to the ISO 20022. There is this process of the know your customer, the to avoid money laundering for operations that are $10,000 or more. The fees that the central bank charge are very low to the intermediaries, but every intermediary will negotiate with their customers what is the fees that they will charge. As I said before, there are support for technical support and attention to the users, the 24 hours a day, the 7 days of the week. Now, this is more what we hope to be, and some challenge that we have with a cross-border payment. The first thing is governance. Who will coordinate that? No, we cannot impose our standards to other countries. It's something that somebody else, or we need an agreement, some legal backup on this. What are the rules of the system? Also, there are a lot of operative issues. Some of them has to do with the time zone that we are. And also there are technological issues like interoperability, the messaging standard that I talked a few moments ago, how we make the interface of the interlink with systems like SWIFT or other private networks. We need to have rules for business continuity, and the other big problem that is cybersecurity. Of course, the challenges that anti-money laundering and financing terrorism are higher with the cross-border payment. So it's something that we have to look at. This is the reason we need this international coordination. It's something that cannot promote from our side. I have to say that many of these things, there is a need for some cross-border payments. Costa Rica is a very friendly country for immigration. Actually, we give some form of identification to the migrants. We have a population like maybe between 12 and 50% of the population are migrants. So the first thing that we like to do, but it's up to them, not up to us, to give some form of identification so they can open an account in a formal institution, in a formal financial entity. This is one thing. The other thing, we are a small open economy. We maybe is our third commercial partner, the whole region. So the regional banking service do some of these fast payments, but this is a solution only for the region. Also, we have something called CIPA. This is an initiative of an entity called Consejo Monetario Centroamericano. It's working more or less. It works better for some countries than others. Part of the problem has been the standards. Has maybe 15 years of existence. They don't have too many transactions so far, but it's picking up. But there are the solutions that the real economy is looking, because they don't have this well-developed system of cross-border payment. I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Governor Madrigal. We will come back to the great achievements you've done a little bit later. Let's move to Lorenza Martinez from Intercam. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you for the invitation, and congratulations for such a great Congress. And I should emphasize that the order of the presentations, I think there have been very well thought in terms of how it has been introduced, the different aspects of technology, tokenization, before this panel in which probably this technological new aspect and issues of stable coins are in the air, especially for cross-border payments. I want to emphasize the importance of the relevance of cross-border payments as the backbone of any economic integration. It might be migration, international trade, but so it helps, but it also an additional friction that might have any transaction between countries. So there has been a growing evidence that the improving cross-border payments would have in terms of not only international trade, but also in development. Actually, there is a paper by the IMF, it was published June this year, in which they explain first the under trade, given the regional aspects of LATAM. And the main aspects are the lack of infrastructure or infrastructure gaps and low quality of governance. But they also find that improving cross-border payments might have a significant and a positive impact, not only in international trade, but also on the development of the region. So this is probably very obvious, but I think that having this evidence helps to put this topic on top of the agenda, as it has been in the BIS, and as it has also mentioned for the G20. In the G20 agenda, our priority has been to improve cross-border payments. And the way they think of improvement cross-border payment is by making them faster, cheaper, and more transparent. And I think that all of us agree that these are probably the main characteristics that can describe a better payment. But I would also want to mention, probably not that these characteristics might be more important, but considering how fast is changing the payment landscape and the role that technology and digitization is having on payments, it's very relevant that we think also in other characteristics that the consumers or the users of payments are now valuing a lot. So we should consider that the user experience, the access of the technology or of the payment, the additional systems or the additional services that a service provider can have are becoming much more important. And for some users, those characteristics might be even more relevant. And as the diversity of users are increasing, or the market is focusing on the specific needs of the different segments, that's something that we have to keep in mind whenever we think on improving the payment system. So, and in that sense, all these actions or agenda that is going in improving infrastructure, I think that helps in reducing this cost or improving efficiency, reducing cost, but also allowing the participants to be to have a flexible offer of services. So before going to what has been done, or where are we in this effort to improve integration of payments, specifically in Latin America, I want to mention some numbers that come from SWIFT that also tell us that even though the region doesn't have all the cross-border payment that it should, it's not only cross-border, as I mentioned, it's also international, but it has been improving. For example, in terms of the speed of the payment, the G20 agenda aims for the 75% of cross-border payments to be credited to the beneficiary within an hour by 2027. Globally, we see that 90% of the payments are delivered between banks within an hour, and 43% are credited to the beneficiary. When we go to LATAM, these numbers are 95%, so between banks is even it's a higher percentage of payment in LATAM, and 40% going to the beneficiary, so a little bit lower. And in Mexico, we have even better numbers. We have 97% of the payments are credited between banks in lower than an hour, and 46% to the beneficiary. So there's still a lot to to go to have to achieve the 75%, but we are in progress. Regarding transparency, and also taking the numbers from SWIFT, in Mexico, only in Mexico, 25% of the operations are tracked until creditor, until it's credited to the end beneficiary. Only 25% are not tracked. And, but this shows a big disparity or big deviation within different banks. The most efficient banks track all the payments except 9%. Only 9% are not tracked the whole process. So it's again moving in the right direction, but it's still far from the objective. In terms of what to be done or what are the main building blocks to go to these objectives, the G20 has 19 actions or building blocks, but in different areas there have been the emphasis in three, the most important. The first one is the regulatory and supervisory frameworks. We all know, it has already been mentioned by Gabriel and Roger, all the regulation in terms of AML, in terms of other type of regulation, is a big friction for cross-border payments. The second is the data exchange and messages. So if we need, for regulatory compliance, one of the most important elements is information. So if we don't have a good way to exchange information and be able to share this information, then that's another difficult thing. So the second one is this data exchange. And the third one is payment system interoperability, which is like the biggest achievement, but we need the first to have solved the first two, or have an agenda on how, or a scheme on how to address those while doing the payment interoperability. So how are we moving to attack these three main building blocks? Well, one is the SWIFT is working in the implementation of the ISO 20022, which is, for the ones that are not familiar with this payment, it's a standard message, and what it's very valuable of this standard is that the information has to be both of the beneficiary and of the issuer of the payment, has to be in very specific fields of the payment. Mm-hmm. And this makes a huge difference for the different institutions involved in a payment, because as of today, the information might be in the message, but it might be all over the place. Even though there are specific spaces, they are not comply with that. So to automate payments becomes very difficult when there is not a standard of information. So the ISO 20022 should be implemented by end of this year, and I think this would be a huge improvement on cross-border payment. And the other one that I wanted to mention, and that's why I said that I like the order of the panels, is what John Oswald just mentioned, the Agora project, which is this project to integrate, to have an integrated platform for cross-border payments. And I don't have all the time to explain it from the side of a private bank. So my bank is part of this initiative. We are participating there. And one of the elements, it has a project that has been very well thought in the different aspects. But one, I think, is this work together of all the stakeholders to make sure not only that it makes sense from the standpoint of having a good infrastructure and an infrastructure that works, but also that it's an infrastructure that is going to be implemented by the different commercial banks that at the end are the ones. Commercial banks are probably later on different institutions, they are the ones that are closer to the users and are the ones that have to be giving the service to the different business or consumers. So I think this is now limited to the development, but we are very optimistic that this will go in the right direction, and this might be something that for the Latin American region might be also very helpful. So I think I stop here.
Thank you very much, Lorenza. Let's move then to Anderson Caputo. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. I think it's fair to say that I'm going to be saying a very fresh good afternoon, no? At the time I was saying to see you. But I wanted to really thank for this invitation, beyond a normal, regular type of invitation, but it's really how we value at the IDB, thanking Agustin, Alexandre for the invitation, but we value this partnership and the synergies that we can construct between BIS and a development bank focus in the region. We find this extremely valuable for the mission that we have in terms of development. And as you see, I think that there is a complementary angle here that my focus will be really with this development bank lens on supporting development in the region. And then more specifically, the angle that this has with one of the main goals we have, which is fostering financial inclusion in the region. And that I think that the key message that I really want to pass is how we see all that we're discussing here as a tremendous opportunity now to move really in a very deterministic way and reach results in terms of financial inclusion with what's happening here. No? I think that we have a tremendous opportunity, but I'm also excited to be speaking here in the context of what has proven to be an invaluable partnership already that we are doing IDB, BIS, more specifically with the Innovation Hub, led by Cecilia, who is moderating the debate. A huge partnership. I see Baltazar over there, that we are working really on a daily basis. And together with the participation of the Central Bank of Canada, we have been working on this project that's called Fuse, the fully scalable settlement engine, which is a back-end infrastructure that can be adapted to multiple types of infrastructures, payment systems being the focus. Now, Fuse is a regional public good, open source for regional central banks. I was telling Baltazar before this that don't ask me about the technology. The technology, he answers all the... But it's really this complementarity that we bring on how in our relationships with the central banks in helping them assess the current stage of things, regulations, etc. We find the complementarity so rich in the partnership that we have. No? And in that regard, just to shed some light on the opportunities. No? The opportunities in terms of financial inclusion, you can see that in several dimensions. If you look at the level of individuals, there has been a tremendous progress when you see in terms of access to financial services account in the region that grew from 51% to 73%. No? So that's not really the main thing. This is very welcome, etc. But there are differences when you look with really closely in this access, in terms of access and use, in terms of human women access, the elderly, and the poorest populations. No? So there is an important angle there for us to be looking at. Now, and then when you look at micro, small, no, and medium enterprises, also persists tremendous barriers in terms of access to credit. Now, in the finance gaps reach a third of the GDP in the region. No? So when you look into these developmental angles, that's why the opportunity is so immense. No? And in the agenda of financial inclusion, when you're discussing financial inclusion, we always make the link to payments, no? As one common element on some of the key items in the agenda. Like when you're discussing access in the last mile, MSME financing, now, or a concept that is being very discussed now, which is the concept of financial well-being. No? In terms of last mile, that was also a key theme prioritized in the G20 Now mentioned, by the way, the paper of the IMF is great. I'm glad that you mentioned there. I'll mention another great paper by John Frost in this topic here, no, in the context of what I'm discussing. But so payments are really, as the primary enabler to access and use of financial services, and the financial technology are really key to achieve such last mile access. No? And we have been, like in this experience, working, we see, for example, the case of Colombia and Ecuador, that we were working in supporting, now to some degree, that they have created digital public infrastructures and policies that are conducive to this goal. No? For MSMEs, part of the solution to close the financing gap is the richness of the data in enterprises that are taking part in the financial system through payments feeding such infrastructures. No? So we know that fintech is key enabler of MSME financing, and also recent experiences that we observed in Chile, Colombia, where regulation has enabled fintech. No? Are steps, and factoring policies are steps in this right direction. No? And finally, I mentioned the financial well-being as a key theme. No? This is defined as a state in which individuals can smoothly manage their financial needs and obligations, cope with adverse shocks, pursue aspirations, goals, and capture opportunities, feel satisfied, no, and confident about their financial lives, considering country-specific. No? But all these are very nice, no? But all these, like a precondition for all this happen, again, no, is to have that access to financial services, where, again, payment systems have a central role. No? So what are the message and the way we see as a development bank is that we are seeing here the region witnessing this transforming presence of digital payment systems that are immediate, interoperable, based on the needs of users. We have examples of Brazil, Costa Rica, Mexico, Paraguay. No, and then, as I mentioned before about John Frost, one key message that I wanted to mention, and why I like so much the paper that he wrote and then getting evidence, is the evidence of the responsibility and role that we can play here, that central banks have, like when you look into the governance of these payments. Now, I think that the example of Brazil is very clear, that Galípolo was talking about how relevant it was that Brazil, like the central bank was now for adoption, no? That the central bank was so much involved in having a key role. So that's why I believe that this partnership with the BIS is so promising. No? Working together, we can try to bear the fruit that this can have in terms of financial inclusion in the region. So that's my start. Thank you very much, Cecilia.
Thank you, Anderson, and let me reflect that we are equally very happy and satisfied with the collaboration we do on Project Fuse. So watch that space, what we're doing in that project. So I'm going to open the floor, but I'm going to take the opportunity to ask each panelist one question. I'll take the opposite direction. So starting with you, Anderson, you did talk about the need for better payment integration, but could you a little bit more unpack what potential you see in that space, and the connection between better payment integration and catalyzing financial inclusion? What you see from your vantage point?
Thank you very much, and it's very good to be in the end, because it makes a good connection with what I was saying before. No? In terms of again, development bank, and with the lens in the objective of financial inclusion, we think that cross-border payment systems integration has the potential to be really a game changer for financial inclusion, right? Reducing the costs, increasing efficiency, expanding access, now can empower individual enterprises, and to a large extent, the economies across the region. But the message here is to think, like, what is the path that way? Now, it requires a lot of work, a lot of collaboration. But we think that the first step is the development of local fast retail payment systems is critical in that regard. No? It has been our motto at the IDB Group to foster financial inclusion through developing these fast retail payment systems at the local national level as the first step. Now, but we have one tool there in the IDB, which is our FinTech Reg Map tool, now that we can see the stage of each of the countries. And only 9 out of 26 member countries of the IDB have put in place a regulation for fast retail payment systems. No? So we consider that there is a good opportunity and starting point. No? And we have also looked at all these very similar way as I was mentioning about the complementarity we have in this partnership with the BIS, that you need like a triad of actions. No? First is that you need to have appropriate public policies which include a suitable regulatory framework to enable fast retail payment systems. Then you have the institutional aspect. No? Enable institutional capacity, understood as the necessary institutional architecture and talent at the central banks and other financial authorities. And third, we talk about the technology, the creating the digital public infrastructures, financial technology, and supporting current market infrastructures so that you can create access to payments, foster standardization, et cetera. No? And that's why we are talking about this project FUSE so much, not because I think we find there all these 3 elements. Now you have the technology, like a BIS together with Central Bank of Canada. They're very advanced, and 95% developed. No? But besides the technology is this work that we do now with regulators, as I mentioned a few examples here, both in the context of assessing the stage now of regulations, but also preparing central banks for this task. No? But then we move to developing these local fast retail payment systems allows you in doing so to several aspects that will be key for integration. No? Some were mentioned here by Lorenza too, like the fact of standardization and interoperability that needs to be there. Like you're planting the seed, no? Swift and efficient settlement. These are all actually, by the way, points that I borrowed from the paper you mentioned, no? But we fully agree. No? And minimizing settlement risks with clear rules, no? Transparency and disclosure. No transparency, like we mean information on fees, exchange rates, processing times. No? Adequate incentives, I think it's a very important one, for private sector collaboration, innovation. No? And so to be closing here, like to sum up, integration is possible indeed, no? But I listed here a series of things that you need to get the work done. No? For payments integration, we need that triad that I mentioned of having the digital public infrastructure, but having the regulation, the institutional capacity at the local level, now with fast retail payment systems that are standardized, capable of communicating with any external counterparty. But we also need one thing that I didn't mention so explicitly, but this is important for regulators, is to create now the space to test innovation in controlled environments so we can prove their potential. And lastly, we need to create a public-public and then a public-private network to reach agreements that ease this integration of payment systems. So at the IDB, we are eager to work with regional central banks. No? And here, just like a marketing thing, we please make sure you're part of FUSE. No, we really believe in this program. Okay, thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you. Lorenza, you very elegantly laid out the frictions, but you also talked about what is actually improving and pointed out the work of the G20 cross-border agenda, how regulatory issues, data messages, payment system operability, they all need to make progress. In addition to that, do you see sort of technical challenges that needs to be addressed, as well as the sort of more organizational ones, if I may call them that?
More than technical challenges or technical opportunities, because also the new technologies, I think, help to solve previous technical problems. These trying to standardize. It was very difficult because we had to think of a standardization or technology integration for different payment system and thinking on the same technology or the same message for the whole process. And something that new technologies are helping is with this tokenization. Then we can have part of the process in this tokenized platform where there's interoperability. All the participants can enter in an established format, but it doesn't have to go all the way to the user, for example. No, so the principle, and just to put it in a very practical way, and using again the framework that is developing in Agora. What the principle is to have this tokenized money, which, by the way, I think it was also a very elegant way to go away from the discussion if it should be CBDC or not. And that was a legal issue for some countries. So instead of thinking on CBDC, well, think of just a tokenized form of money, but money is not the money itself. So we can, in technical terms and in terms of operations, might be the same thing, but in legal aspects, it might be much more easier to manage. But that's in the platform. So that helps to several things. One is that it allows to have only one settlement for all the participants. So we are talking about very difficult transactions because there might be the user, then there's the bank of the user, there's the correspondent bank, probably the central bank, then the other correspondent bank. So there might be different participants. So instead of thinking, well, why don't we get rid of all these participants and just have one thing? Say, well, we don't have to change the way it operates. With the technology, we can have an atomic settlement, so all the participants settle at the same point, and it doesn't matter if we have 2, 1, or 4 participants. So that also helps to make all this organizational and arrangement out of the discussion. We don't have to discuss if we have to, this correspondent banking new model, we don't have to say, well, we don't want correspondent banking. Well, we want correspondent banking banks, but we can do it in a more efficient way. So the model and the way we operate very likely will change in the future. But what is important is to have a way to simplify the way we do things today without changing all the most complicated things. So that, I think that technology, it's more like an enablement that is helping to solve a lot of these difficult issues.
Okay, thank you. Continuing to Governor Madrigal, you talked, and thank you for the rich presentation about the SINPE, or SINPE in Costa Rica. Taking it to the next level, what does it take to connect fast payment systems in different countries? What sort of main legal and governance obstacles do you see and advise to be addressed?
Some of the ones that already Lorenza mentioned. Coordination, there are legal issues, exchange rate, what will be the currency? How do we do internationally the settlement? Let me be clear with this. We have this fast system of payments in Costa Rica, and also we have these cross-border payments. But we don't have a fast payment cross-border system. What we don't have is how to take the advantage we have local in SINPE to take internationally. And we need a lot of coordination. For some of you that are familiar with Costa Rica, everything has to go mainly in the law. It will be a huge change, huge challenges. I think the people from the FLAR is helping us with that. There is this initiative, the FLAR, Latin American Reserves Administration group that they are now going into this cross-border payments. And we are coordinating that. But yeah, the most, from my point of view, the most difficult task is the coordination. We have this thing with the Central American and Dominican Republic. We want to set an international standard with the IBAN standard, and some countries didn't want that. So it was very difficult for us to change that. That is something the international widely accepted, just to be like another Central American country or Dominican Republic. So it has to be more mature and to have this long vision that we want to integrate to the world to see what are the standards. For example, we didn't have any problem with the messaging system that we have. Now we are in a group with the OECD for this economy, more digital economy, and they are asking for this standard of accounts. Okay, so we will change to this ISO 20022. Something like these little steps that we need in order to have this standardization in many senses, in regulation, maybe in taxes, in how to deal with the exchange rate, and money laundering is another big friction in this, and we need to do that. We want to comply with that. So this is the kind of challenge that we have. Maybe are not as technological, but they are more institutional in the sense that the rules that we set in order to fix a conflict.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Governor Galípolo, your institution have impressed the rest of the world with PICs, but you also have the DREX project. So it would be interesting to hear you unpack a bit more what sort of merits you see in these more novel technologies, tokenized deposits, new versions of central bank settlement assets in achieving payments integration. Is it even possible that crypto can also play a role in this package of needs that needs to be satisfied?
I think that there are some particularities that we have in Brazil that deserve to be mentioned here and probably can establish some kind of links with the previous presentations that we saw here. First of all, I think Agustin made the question about why don't we use, if you are using stable coins, why don't we use public money digitalized or in some kind of crypto? We in Brazil saw a huge growth of the use of cryptocurrency or crypto assets during the last 2-3 years. And that lifted questions about the motivation, why we saw such a huge growth. At the beginning, we saw that more than 90% was stable coins. So the question was probably, we assumed that probably it was an easier way to have an account in dollars, for example. But then there was a discussion if the motivation was much more a speculative motivation, if they were buying dollars for investments, or if it was a currency or to means of payment. And the answer was it's much more to use as a means of payment. And most of that to buy things and to shop things from abroad for cross-border payments. And usually things that people are buying, and that's the bad part, they are using that because it maintains some kind of opaque vision for taxation or for money laundering or things like that. This is not an accusation or something like that, but when you see what people are buying, and so we are already using crypto for cross-border payments as a mean of payment. But there is always this doubt if the motivation behind that use, it is one kind of derivation of the trust idea that Chris mentioned. It is a kind of privacy, but not often or not always a privacy because you don't want that government knowing what you are doing for other reasons, or the government is cross, but probably because people are buying things and they don't want to declare what they are buying because they want to avoid some kind of taxation or things like that. So this is one thing that worries a lot and puts a challenge for Brazil in surveillance and regulatory, because there are clear divisions between the privacy, the fiscal privacy and the financial privacy. And this exchange of information between the internal revenue and the central bank is not easy, because we need to respect that idea of the privacy. So this is the first thing. The second thing is about the DREX, as you question. Since the beginning, and probably this is a bias, when I look at the DREX and what the DREX could solve as a problem, it always seems to me that the solution that first Carsten proposed it and now was presented here could be much more well-fitted to the solutions that we want to address since the beginning, because DREX is not a central bank digital currency. It is a DLT with tokenization of deposits and assets with a structure of smart contracts. This is the idea of the DREX. And it's curious because in Brazil, the expectation that we have and the expectation that the population has with the DREX is to solve not only as to payments, but especially to create an infrastructure, a public infrastructure, that if you have the custody of the assets and the money, probably you could improve finance with collateralized assets. Because in Brazil, the participation of high-cost loans and credit is really high. And part of that is because of difficulty that you have to have guarantees and collateralized finance. So with the DREX, when we try to explain to people what kind of problem that the DREX will solve in your life, usually the example that we use is you can have collateralized finance and credit using this infrastructure. But then again, I think we need to think at the innovation, the technology as a mean, not as an end of itself, and looking in which problems we can solve. And I personally see the solutions that the BIS are discussing today as well fitted to the problems that we have today in Brazil.
Thank you. Okay, time to open the floor for questions. And Alexander, you were quickest, so you get it first.
Thank you so much. Great discussion. Perhaps a question for the two governors in the panel. We do, as was mentioned here, integrating fast payment system. It's doable. There is technology for that. We do have projects, and I speak under your control, Cecilia. For instance, Nexus integrates fast digital payments in Asia, and so on. But of course, to integrate, you have to have the economic case, you have to have the critical mass for it to be worth it. But also, if you integrate the two systems here, you have the problem these currencies are not convertible. Mm-hmm. So you need a layer of liquidity, of something that is accepted by both jurisdictions. And here in the Western Hem, we do have the common currency, which is the US dollar. So how do you see, going forward, the potential for integration of payments in the region, and the issue that we do not have this convertible currency? Do you see this is a problem, or what's the vision?
Please.
Okay. Well, for us, the answer is we're a small open economy, highly dependent on trade. We use dollar as the currency for these international transactions. So our proposal maybe should be to use the US dollar as the settlement currency, but it has to be agreed with the others. It's the big challenge. Maybe it's an easy one. In practice, the whole world is accepting the US dollar as the main international currency for settlements. But it's one issue. It has to be agreed among the participants. This is the reason we need some instance for coordination. This will be my answer for now.
Gabriel?
You know, there was a comedian in Brazil that used to say that technology was invented to solve problems that didn't exist before the technology. But in this case, it's the other way around, because this new technology already provided solutions to this kind of problem that you are raising. I think the challenge that we have are the old ones, as you mentioned, the conversibility of the currency, to create a critical mass in the way that Karsten mentioned before, creating more integration in trade, more financial integration. This is the old questions with a new kind of cloth to use the picture that was used before here. So, and Brazil is trying to do it with new agreements with Europe, trying new agreements with Mexico. So that's the idea, to create a critical mass and try to overcome these old challenges that we have in our economy.
Any other question? Okay, the gentleman in the light blue tie, please. Maybe you should state your name.
Guillermo Avellan from the Central Bank of Ecuador. I have a question for Governor Madrigal. Instant cross-border payments have had a great success in Central America, as you show in your presentation. I'm wondering how difficult it was to connect different platforms managed by different central banks. I'm wondering if international bank account was required during this process, or you were able to implement later?
No. What I was talking about was how well the SIMPE works in Costa Rica for domestic payments with the economy. There are other forms of cross-border payments. For example, there is a regional bank. Just as a short story, is a person working in Costa Rica that gets their payment every week. They deposit that in their bank. Actually, he asks the payer to put the money in their bank. Immediately, a person in Nicaragua, this I know for real, a person in Nicaragua will have access with a bank card to go to a ATM machine and take the dollars. That's something what was paid in colones in Costa Rica. No central bank in this transaction. This is for the regional bank. Also, we have the traditional SWIFT, but it takes sometimes days in order to do the clearance of the operation. And also there are other efforts. But the challenge is how to make these positive characteristics of the fast payment in SIMPE to take abroad. There is this development with I mentioned before, the Consejo Monetario Centroamericano, called CIPA. It has some traction, but not so much so far. It's, when you compare the volume and the quantity of transactions, it's very small in proportion for a country in Costa Rica that is, for example, is exporting like $12 million a year, something like that. And, imports maybe $13,000. So you have maybe a trade that accounts for more than 50% of the GDP in Costa Rica. So what CIPA is doing is very, very little. And also we have to do to this process of standardization. The fees is a big question. How much will be the fees? We in Costa Rica, we don't believe in telling to the intermediaries, you have to charge this. No, I can tell you how me as a central bank can charge you, and you can take the service or not. But the relation with the customer is between you and your customer, and the central bank has nothing to do with that. It allow the competition to solve that. So this is the kind of problem that we have. I don't know if I answer all the questions, but I will be more than happy.
Augustine, please.
I have a question for Lorenza, but obviously others can jump in. I mean, I have the sense that the traditional institutions that have been in the banking, but also in the payment space, we are too attached to our forms of doing business. And it is my sense that, I mean, the banks in particular have a very important platform to modernize everything and make it everything very effective. But I see that it is very difficult for them to move fast. So do you think that the legacy systems is an issue? Do you think that regulation is an issue? Do you think, how afraid are the commercial banks of what's going on with stablecoins, for example? And so what is the type of response, or how can I mean, obviously at the end of the day, this should be open for all participants, no? But then there might be circumstances where authorities are holding back the change, but there also might be situations where the banks could do things in a different way and sort of do leapfrogging and become more efficient. So how do you see this? I mean, it's not a very clear question, but for me to understand better how that interaction takes place is very important.
Yeah, I think that when I was at the central bank, I was always thinking on that. Why is that it takes so much for the banks to adopt something new, and why is that? Definitely, the legacy, the technology, is a big issue, and I have seen that since I was at Accenture as a consultant, and I saw different banks, and in the 2 banks that I have been working, I see that changes in technology are very difficult to do, and especially because you have to be doing a lot of things at the same time. So you want to update a system that is already too old and that it doesn't work with new technology. Then you have to also include new products because you have to go with the competition. There are some risks that you also have either because of regulation or because you had identified in terms of fraud, in terms of cybersecurity, and then you have to solve those. So there are so many things going in terms of technology that it's becoming, I think, one of the most difficult things in banks, even if they are not very big banks, but the systems that we have, that they are still not, as people say in technology, no, this is blocks, and so you can change one block and then another. At the end, it doesn't work that way. You have to be moving that. So I think that's one issue. The other is that the way the competition is also a big point. I'm not sure that stablecoin is the most, the closest competition that traditional banks see. Probably it's all a different type of fintechs. And going into what I was mentioning before, that fintechs can go to satisfy the need for a specific user. So these very general solutions don't work anymore. So you have to have a service for small firms, another for big firms, another for retail. So this, the way that you have to provide different services to your different customers is difficult, and you can be losing some of these segments because of the competition that is targeting specific segments. And in regulation, yeah, it's difficult regulation, but I will say, and probably some of my colleagues won't like this. But, and my background also might affect this, but a lot of regulation are things that we want to do in any case. For example, for AML, there's huge regulation for AML, but we don't want to be involved in any AML issue. Even it doesn't matter if there's a regulation or it's not a regulation. Sometimes we go beyond regulation because it's a risk that we see. So some of the regulations are difficult, but are targeting risks that we need to also be managing. Mm-hmm.
Please.
In answer to Agustin, yeah, it's all that you said, I saw in my country. I saw, for example, the traditional banking entities opposing for the registration of the fintech. It's this thing. Sometimes it's we ask, why do you do that? It's the way that we do things. No, but you can do more efficient. I can put an example. For example, making transactions with a foreign exchange. They have this standard of T+2 to settlement. Why? There is no need. We can do real time. And it costs a lot for them to get in T+0 and T. Things like that. So there is a combination of many things. Fear of competition, it's expensive to do technological changes, and also this legacy thing or traditional way that we think. And ignorance from our side as regulators too.
I think we could go on for longer about the issues around stablecoin. We heard Professor Christine Parlor earlier. Her forecast is, if it happens, is going to be a big wake-up call, I think, for the community. On the other hand, it was reassuring to hear Lorenza saying that it might be more of the fintech and more tailor-made needs that needs to be satisfied. And those who are like me thinking that the fiat money system is still the best system with central bank money at the core, hope you're right, but we'll live to see. Please join me in the hand for an excellent panel.